To us, who are you and what is All On?
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Pleasure being here. My name is Caroline Eboumbou. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of All On. All On is an impact investment funder. And for those who were here during the keynote speech, somebody asked a question to which the keynote speaker answered, explaining that we do not have to have the projects ready to make it work for the financiers, but we need to have the finance adapt to the projects and make it work. Well, that's what we do at All On. We are a solutioner. We make it happen in the sense that people would ask you, are you a private equity fund? Are you a debt provider? Are you a grant provider? We are all of it. We are based out of Nigeria. And through our very flexible and patient capital, we provide funds to renewable energy service providers off-grid that provide services and products to the unserved and underserved. It's important to say that it's unserved and underserved because Nigeria has the particularity of having people that are technically connected to the grid, but who actually do not receive energy. So they actually represent a big part of this population. In Nigeria, we're talking about the largest economy in Africa, to over 200 million people, out of which 83 million people do not have access to electricity. That is major. We cannot have what is supposed to be the lung, the heartbeat of the continent as the biggest economy, have 83 million people not connected. So when it comes to connecting people, for a long time, be it the governments or the main development financing institutions, were solely looking at grid extension. Grid extension was the solution. But finally, over the last few years, it's now a fact that it's not going to all come through the grid extension, which can be costly, takes time, and we also know the important work that needs to be done on the environmental and social side for this grid extension. But you now have some modular solutions that can be cost-effective, that can have rapid deployment and provide electricity to those most in need in the unserved areas of grid, or what people call DRE, decentralized renewable energy. So this is a key part of the equation. Finally, people have understood it's not anymore an afterthought or a byproduct, but it's now a key factor in the equation that is being looked at to answer the energy cap. And this is what we do at All On. We provide funds, all forms of funds, for the people involved in making this happen.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So maybe just for the audience and myself included to understand a little bit, because we live in this part of the world where grid is prevalent. As you said, many of the communities there may not have access to the grid. So how do we help companies understand sort of that context in order to design solutions actually specific for that, right? So, because for a lot of us, we can't imagine a life without electricity, for example. So how do people sort of live in that situation? Are they aware? Do they want electricity? And then how do they actually get access to it if they're sort of far from the grid?
Absolutely. Another particularity of Nigeria is the fact that when it comes to indeed bringing electricity to those areas that are not connected to the grid, you will actually not have an issue that you have in other markets, which is called ability to pay, willingness to pay. Mm-hmm. Because in other areas, people, in other countries that have this issue with grid access, people do not rely so much on diesel generators and other services. But in Nigeria, because it's a necessity, and because indeed people have had to adapt, they're really resilient and had to find solutions, a lot of people use diesel generator, which we already know, costly, pollutant, and so on. So when it comes to people's ability to pay, they're willing. It's not an issue. They're actually, because they're already paying something that can be quite costly and quite detrimental to their health. So actually, when you bring along a solution that can help answer the health and the cost issue, it's it's really well received. One thing, up until recently, people will tell you what, solar energy is too costly. Solar energy is too costly. In the last recent years, when you look at the cost of, it has decreased tremendously.
Yes.
Well, it's actually the off-grid sector is benefiting from the gains that the on-grid sector has made, because the technology, be it on the battery storage, solar panels, it has, as we just said, improved, and therefore the costs have decreased. with that, we've been able to also ensure that those cost gains now are passed along to the end beneficiaries. So really, adoption of solar is tremendous. And again, putting back into context, the country in which we work in Nigeria recently, after the recent presidential election, a major fuel subsidy was removed. So you can imagine the impact. People who used to, again, rely on fuel can now actually look at solar as the most viable opportunity. And this is where we are very important in making sure that the developers who provide those solutions have the right tools. And just to give you a bit now of numbers, because it's important to go from the conceptual to the actual real impact. In the 6 years that we've been created, our funding has actually brought along more than 140,000 connections, which translates into over 700,000 people connected. So just with, as I said, this very flexible and patient capital mix of debt, equity, and grant, we've been able to impact close now, and we're getting closer to 1 million people in just shortly under 5 years. And we're continuing. There's a lot of work to be done. Creating impact, we're talking about people up until the arrival of our project had to rely on the kerosene lamps, had to rely on the fuel generators. Well, now a new solution is there. So that's a very concrete example. Another concrete example, if I may, I know we don't have so much time, but
go ahead.
I'd love to talk about, we spoke about initiatives that can help accelerate the transition. One of the element, again, the keynote speaker spoke about was the high transaction cost and supply chain cost, and how it impacts in the agriculture sector. Well, it's also the same in the energy sector.
Yes.
When you look at the elements that are used for the solar markets, a lot of it is still imported from abroad, and therefore high cost to get those elements. At our fund, as I said, we are solution-driven. We thought about it and we said, what can we do? Concretely, what can we do to help reduce the cost of getting those equipment into the country? Because ultimately, we're all talking about SDG 7, getting to 2030, getting to those goals. It's not going to happen without us getting to that scale that we need. So how can we, at our level, create that scale? One thing that we decided to do, again, very concrete example, is to put together a platform that we call Demand Aggregation for Renewable Technology, a platform that uses the very simple fact that numbers is power. What do we mean by numbers is power? Instead of having developers going and negotiating on a one-to-one basis with suppliers overseas, we aggregate them. We have put together a platform where we aggregate the demand from X number of developers, and we negotiate on their behalf. As I sit here today, I can tell you that for the developers who have benefited from this funding, they have gained up to 30% cost, 30% savings in their business. And here is how you create change, and here is how you create scale by really, how may I say, change the balance of power, ensuring that you actually, the people who are making those solutions happen are given the tools to actually effectively negotiate and therefore reduce the cost of their projects on the ground. And I think one last thing I'll say is that people who do know the sector will always tell you, oh, the mini-grid sector, oh, it's not bankable. The mini-grid sector is not really viable. Well, actually, we are getting to that bankability. One of the companies in our portfolio just last year, Husk, was and that company also benefited from this demand aggregation for renewable technology platform that I've mentioned. Just last year, announced that they were the first mini-grid company in the world to actually reach that profitability, both for their activities in India and Africa. So this is massive. There is not a change, there is a shift. We can get to bankable, powerful projects by using solutions that are close to the people and that deploy rapidly.
Very good. So you're practically a platform in a way, right? So on one end, you're curating the solutions, you're helping them managing their costs and many others through the aggregated negotiations. And on the other hand, you're trying to bring the communities in, so kind of building the market. And you're providing a whole set of different services. So maybe sort of stay on the solution side a little bit. There are many different challenges that you could think about. There are solar suppliers, for example, in the developed world or in China. You can bring those in, or you can empower the local community to develop your own solution. So maybe help us think through how do we make this more embedded within the community and build that capability, right? So the community can self-regenerate and innovate for the longer term.
Thank you so much for this question, because indeed it is essential. I just spoke earlier about getting to scale. I just spoke about this solution that helps us get to scale by aggregating demand and procuring overseas. This is just part of the solution. This is in the immediate and short term. This is what we can do to make sure we can help bring the prices down. But in the long term, how do we ensure that we will even have these capabilities locally so that we can produce locally? Local content is essential. We will not get to scale, we will not get to long-term gain without having a strong local force. So again, talking about very concrete example, to answer this question, I'm happy to talk about one of the project that illustrates just what you asked about. So as I said, we are a very flexible funder that have several solutions. We do the debt, the equity from the investment arm, but we also have a key element that we call the All On Hub. At the hub, think of any need that a company needs aside of capital investment, because as I said, for capital investment, we have our investment arm. But any other need, talk about financial modeling, business analysis, marketing, legal agreement, we provide this support, this technical support, which is essential to also build the local capabilities of the companies. So 4 years ago, a company, some engineers, because again, with this hub, we start as early as what we call the ideation level. Ideation is when, just think of a seed that has been planted in an engineer's mind, we help it grow. 4 years ago, one of these engineers came and realized, he said, myself, I'm a mini-grid developer, but getting those solar panels is just too costly. It takes time, it takes money, it gets stuck at the port for hours and for months. What do we do about it? With just a mere 50,000 grant at the time, through the All On Hub, we said, okay, let's work on this idea. What exactly can we do? What are some of the things we can do locally? Not everything will always be imported. Fast forward, because we don't have enough time for me to take you through all of the steps, but there are many steps from the certification and so on. Fast forward, 4 years later, in October 2023, so just a few months ago, that company just launched Nigeria's first ever 100 megawatt solar panel assembly facility. Never done before. And so with this now, we're talking to now several equity providers whom 5 years ago wouldn't have looked at the project, who are now asking us, okay, can we do more? Should we invest in them? Should we have another capacity? So this is how you actually create that change. You take that daring idea, you invest in this seed, and then, as I said, you go the extra step, because again, going back to what we were saying earlier, the projects won't always think your financing solution. You have to make sure you yourself as a financier, you're ready to go the long way. We are VC, we are PE, we are bank, we are we are a company. Somebody recently said we're actually a parent taking a company from kindergarten all the way to university. Yes, we do all of it.
Very good. Well, in a lot of this place, right, you have to be all of it in order to develop the market. So let's shift on the community side. So what's the community view of the role that you provide, both on the solution side and also helping them like have a better life, both economically and also socially? So and then how do their engagement help you enhance or continue to define the mission that you have around impact?
No, this is essential because, as I said earlier on, an important way for this to last is to ensure the model is bankable. Bankability will not come unless you actually have a community that's willing to pay, available to pay. For this to happen, you have to look very clearly at what we call the demand side. It's one thing to help on the supply side and ensure that the right platform are put in place, but what about the demand? So we're very intentional about investing in projects that actually have a demand element, meaning productive uses of energy. Providing energy is good, but it's not just about a light bulb. What do we provide to ensure that the energy we provide is actually is going to be a source of revenue generation? So we do work with the community, looking at what the communities have on the ground on the agricultural side, be it a very simple, rice milling machine, all the way to an actual agricultural plant. How can we, with the energy we provide, ensure that there is actually revenue generation? Because ultimately, this is what we're doing. Energy is an enabler. Electricity is an enabler. So we have to make sure that as we provide this electricity, we enable the communities to actually strive on them. So we're involved from day one. We're involved in terms of how we design the project. Obviously, the communication, the community engagement, be it with the chief or over different level of appropriation, happens from day one.
Excellent. So my last question is really sort of your role sort of in the middle, right? So many a time we see that happen in Latin America, we see that happening to China or in India. A lot of these, with the technology advancement, the locals, once they started to unleash this innovative capability, there is a leapfrog effect, right? You can reset, for example, how do you measure impact? You can reset how do you manage relationship between corporations and community. So what are some of the key lessons you learn, and what do you want the audience to take away when you have this opportunity, right? So to the first keynote, what is a more sustainable financing model? What is a way that can bring us to more circularity instead of ever chase for growth?
Absolutely. So there are several, I guess, ways to look at it. One of the ways I'll say is that, for instance, talking about, going back from the macro into the macro, those massive investors, the DFIs and so on, who have those funds that they can on-lead in different country initiatives, look at what's existing. Very often you actually do not have to reinvent the wheel. Very often you already have some implementers on the ground that are already delivering projects, that have already provided some solutions such as the ones that I've explained. Invest into those that are working in the community. You'd be surprised, but it still doesn't happen. Sometimes you'll find a DFI who's trying to come and reinvent something that's already existing. So that's one thing to do. Let's not reinvent the wheel. When it's working, just make sure you give it the tools to actually scale. And then, as I was saying earlier, going back to making finance work for us, this is literally the way we look at the projects we fund. We are one of the rare institutions in the country that provides the funds at the tools at the rates at which we're providing. We are still dealing in, again, the countries where we're talking about SSA are countries whereby macroeconomic conditions make it very difficult for business developers. The local currency access is a critical issue. We don't even have enough time to get into the depth of it. But when you deal with countries that from a 3-year period can lose 50% of their value, no matter how good of a business person is, when they deal with such issue, their business, how can they last? So how do we ensure that we provide some mechanism to help those business developers fight and support these kind of macroeconomic waves? For me, is very important, and it's something that is at the heart of what we do in the fund that I had. And then obviously, as I said, putting the community at the heart of it. One of the things that we've done is on the side, as I say, we do much more than just investing. We have recently financed a very local Solar is Better campaign with different local autochthone languages, with Pidgin and other languages, so that again, the message can get to the beneficiaries, because ultimately it is for them that we do it. And once you break it down and make sure that it's accessible, you'll be surprised. You don't even need to do your marketing. They'll do your marketing for yourself. Exactly. They'll go and tell Solar is Better to everyone.
On that happy note, thank you very much, Caroline, again. I'll steal one of her line. We need to put the community back into our heart when we reimagine finance. The road is difficult. We're behind. But there is a way to create that positive future. So thank you all very much for being us.